Hello, and welcome to this lesson about the political and historical concept of propaganda. By the end of this lesson, you will be able to define propaganda, understand the 6 different propaganda techniques and identify them in practice, and understand propaganda as something which comes in many forms and exists in many contexts. So, first of all, what is propaganda? Well, the Oxford English Dictionary defines propaganda as information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote a political cause or point of view. This is a very broad definition, and that is because propaganda itself is something which is very broad. The information being communicated can come in any form, whether it be text, an image, or music, for example. The agents, or the people promoting the propaganda, can be governments, political parties, or social movements. And the cause, or the purpose, of the propaganda can be simply to get people to think in a certain way, or it can be trying to influence behavior, for example, getting people to vote. So propaganda can come in many different forms, but there are 6 techniques, of which all forms of propaganda use at least one. These are emotional appeal. This involves appealing to the emotions of the audience. For example, a propagandist might suggest that a disaster will result if people do not act in a certain way, and this way they appeal to the fear in the audience. Secondly, glittering generalities are closely linked to emotional appeal. They involve making people approve and accept something without really considering the evidence or the detail behind it. It involves making bland but eye-catching statements, for example Trump's notorious phrase, "Make America Great Again." Testimonials use famous people or figures who are deemed trustworthy to endorse a cause. The bandwagon technique seeks to get people to do something because, it is claimed, everyone else is doing it. Fifth, the plain folks technique attempts to convince the audience that the party in question or the politician in question is of the people and can therefore be trusted to act in the interests of the people. Finally, there's the scientific approach. This uses scientific jargon, numbers, or statistics to convince people by appealing to objective evidence, even if this evidence, which may be correct in principle, is manipulated to serve the cause in question. So, let's have a look at some examples of propaganda. There are 5 different examples on this page. I want you to match them up to the 6 techniques which we just introduced. One of the examples matches up to 2 techniques. You have 30 seconds to do this. Okay, let's see how you did. In the top left-hand corner, we have the bus used by the Vote Leave campaign to encourage people to vote for Britain to leave the European Union in the Brexit referendum in 2016. It is a classic example of the scientific approach. It uses the statistic that Britain sends to the EU £350 million a week to encourage people to support the principle that Britain will be better off outside of the European Union. Secondly, we have Barack Obama eating a burger outside the McDonald's restaurant. This photo, which is staged, is an example of the plain folks technique. Obama is presented as just like everybody else. He eats burgers at McDonald's too, and therefore he can be trusted to act in the interests of the people. In the top right-hand corner, we have Hillary Clinton on stage with Jay-Z and Beyoncé. She is using these influential and famous people to endorse her cause, and so this is an example of the testimonial technique. In the bottom right-hand corner, we have a poster from World War II Britain. It is telling the women of Britain to encourage their husbands, sons, or fathers to go off and fight in the war. It uses the bandwagon technique, suggesting to women that other women in the country are doing their duty and allowing the men in their lives to go and fight. Finally, we have Obama again, and the poster from his 2008 presidential campaign. This one links to both emotional appeal and glittering generalities. We see just Obama's face and underneath the word hope. There is no detail here, there is no cause or policy that is being promoted. Simply the poster tries to appeal to the emotions of the audience and link Obama to the feeling or the principle of hope. Each of these examples are visual, they're photos or posters or advertisements. But propaganda is something which takes many, often more subtle forms. It is very common in the arts. I'm going to play you a piece of music. While you listen, I want you to think, could there be a political message in this music? If so, what is it? And secondly, which propaganda technique does this music embody? Here we go. Okay, what you just heard was Song of the Forest by Dmitri Shostakovich. Now this music was commissioned by the Soviet regime after Shostakovich was denounced for a second time for showing anti-Soviet principles. It depicts Stalin's reforestation program and won the Stalin Prize in 1950. The lyrics during that triumphant finale which you just heard are "Glory to the wise Stalin." It's a classic example of socialist realist music, and of propaganda which uses the technique of emotional appeal. The music evokes feelings of pride, or joy, or glory within the audience, and the lyrics are supposed to link these feelings to the actions of Stalin, the great leader of the USSR. This piece of music also shows that propaganda exists in many different political and historical contexts. Propaganda is not just a product of modern mass media or political spin. In fact, to understand propaganda, we need to see it as a phenomenon that has existed throughout history. All political regimes or parties with political interests make use of it. Finally, we have two examples which show this existence of propaganda throughout history. On the left, we have an image by Jacques-Louis David of Napoleon's coronation in Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. We see Napoleon lifting the crown and placing it on the Empress's head. By doing so, he claims that his authority has been won by himself through his merit and his ability. He does not, like the kings of France who preceded him, take his authority from God. On the right-hand side, we have the play King Richard III, written by Shakespeare. This play, which is written under the Elizabethan monarchy, glorifies the Tudor regime by depicting King Richard III, who was defeated by Henry Tudor at the Battle of Bosworth in the end of the 15th century, as an evil king, someone who damaged the realm of England. Shakespeare's aim is to glorify the Tudor regime, and even though this was not commissioned by that regime itself, it is a classic example of propaganda. So, let's sum up. Propaganda is information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote a political cause or a point of view. There are 6 different techniques of propaganda. These are emotional appeal, glittering generalities, testimonials, the bandwagon technique, the plain folks technique, and scientific appeal. And lastly, propaganda comes in many forms and has existed in many different times and places. It has emerged in different ways throughout history. Thank you for listening to this lesson.